All right, guys, I am Kevin DeAnna. Welcome to Identity Politics. Welcome to our Thursday live stream. And today we have a very special guest coming from the mother continent where he attended the Remigration Summit and then was supposed to give a speech in France, but the French government had something to say about that. So he has experienced the real persecution that so many of our comrades are facing over in Europe. He is my boss. He is a man who really needs no introduction in terms of everything he has done for our people. It's my pleasure to welcome to the show live my boss, Jared Taylor. Oh, Mr. Taylor, thank you for joining us here on Identity Politics. God knows we have so much to talk about.
We always do, don't we? Thanks so much
for inviting me. I'm never short on content. Nope. I'm never short on like what I have to write about or talk about.
Never. Yes, indeed.
First things first. Let's start with the more optimistic thing, which of course was the Remigration Summit. Now, obviously, this is something where we had massive participation from all these different European countries. We had movements that are on the brink of gaining power in some areas or already have a little bit of power in some areas. And we also had a fair bit of representation from North America, not just you, but also from Canada, other groups from America. I mean, this is the first event of this kind that I think had such a broad reach.
Well, I was at the first Remigration Conference, and there were people from all over Europe, and there were some Americans. There were even 2 Americans who spoke at the first Remigration Conference. This time at the summit, as you know, Cyan Quinn, an American, yep. She spoke. Also, Stefan Forte, the New York Republican, spoke. Greg Bovino. There was another American guy, an influencer, whose name was unfamiliar to me. And my guess, Mr. Dan, is that of all the delegations from every country, the American one was the largest. And it would have been fascinating to see a list of all of the countries that sent people. I just personally, knocking around, I met guys from New Zealand, from South Africa, from every European country you can imagine, Canada, as you say. This was really a white people's conference. It wasn't billed as such, but that's in effect what it was. And I begged the organizers, I said, look, please list the countries that sent somebody. And I'd like to know how many people the different countries sent. And I bet you any amount of money, even more than Portuguese, Americans were the #1 delegation.
Well, that speaks well of us. I mean, that's how we have to carry ourselves going forward. We're the vanguard of everybody.
Well, we are the largest white population anywhere in the world, and we better start acting like it.
Yeah, everybody forgets that. I mean, because people will talk about the demographics and say, like, well, you know, if you look at Europe, the demographic situation is better in relative terms and everything else, and that's true. But as Joseph Stalin said, quantity has a quality all its own. There are a lot of us here if we get our act together.
About 160 million of us. If we really did, even just if a tenth of us got our act together, things would happen. But as you know, I'm an inveterate optimist. I thought it was really a absolutely wonderful conference. There were a lot of unsung heroes. One of them was Maximilian Merkel. As you probably know, he's the head of Generation Identity Germany. And the Germans have these crazy laws whereby they can prevent their citizens from leaving the country if the German authorities think that they will blacken the reputation of Germany overseas. And here is a German who actually has the temerity to think that Germany should remain German. And they figured out that he was going to get on an airplane at a particular time, and they kicked him off the plane and said, "You're not going, buddy." And he said quietly to himself under his breath, "I sure am." And he got into a car, and he drove for 22 straight hours and gave his talk. Maximilian Merkel, a great guy. I met him afterwards when I was doing various kinds of interviews, but that is the kind of commitment that I see in all of these young people who are at the conference and who are working tirelessly for our people. This is night and day compared to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly compared to when I started this back in 1990. This just fills me with optimism. So the whole thing was just brimming with commitment, ardor, and as one of the speakers said, probably 500 people or 600 people, however many are you here, are going to walk out of this meeting full of recommitment, full of energy, full of dedication to go back and fight for your nation and for our people. And I think that's one of the great, great effects of a meeting like this. All of these people who share their excitement, you meet new people, you see old friends. It is just a fantastic time. And I'm sure you'll be going to one of these meetings very soon.
Oh, absolutely. Assuming they let me in. If you look at that's always the thing, right?
They'll let you in. Now,
they let me in last time.
Yes. Well, we'll see why I'm worried about not being let in. But
yeah,
of course, so
we should probably go into it. We should probably talk about that.
You've already spoken to several people who were there. Greg Bovino, when he walked on the stage, he got a roaring standing ovation. And later on at the dinner that evening, I asked him, Commander, people call him Commander because he had this informal
That was his title.
That was only an informal title. That was what people started. Somebody, I think it was, I can't remember, maybe in any case, somebody referred to him as the commander of the operation, but that was just informal. That's not his real title, but it stuck, and he has that demeanor about him, and people called him Commander. I said, Commander.
That's what I called him during the interview too. I thought it was his real title, but I'm going to keep calling him that, so it's good. Yeah. I should just real quick, because we had a couple super chats real quick. I just want to say no questions, but just some nice things. Kaiser Prime with $50, unable to watch the show live, so we'll have to catch the replay. Looking forward to hearing Uncle Jared. Best wishes from Norway, and keep up the great work. Thank you, Kaiser Prime. Thank you, comrade. Always great to see you on here. Dirt Gang Arizona, $20. We all appreciate your work, Jared and Kevin. We will have our home again. Yes, we will. Yes, and Crafty Blooms, $14. Thank you for all your works, Mr. Taylor. So your fans are tuning in.
Well, okay, as I was saying at the dinner afterwards, I had not actually, we'd spoken on the phone, but I had never met him face to face before. And I walked over to where he was sitting, and I said, well, Commander, have you ever had such a rapturous welcome? He said, never in my life. He was thrilled. And that guy is going to be a star wherever he goes, so long as he is among wide-awake white people. Now, he was scheduled to be at the Remigration Summit in Norway that is going to take place 2 days from now, Saturday. But I understand there were airplane problems, and he's not going to be there. So that's one of the. Well, I'm very pleased to have had that super chat from Norway. I know some of the Norwegians, like all of these young guys, dedicated, smart, on the ball, well-educated, well-informed, incisive, reasonable, very, very impressive. I mean, this is a new generation of racially committed white people, and I think they are going to pull it out of the bag. I'm really convinced of that.
I think so, too. I've always, weirdly enough, and I know this kind of contrasts with my American chauvinism in some ways, which I'm occasionally guilty of, but in my gut, I've always been more optimistic about Europe than America in the long run, just because I figured the Europeans will be able to get their act together, and because the movements look so much more advanced than what we have going now.
There are two really big differences. One is that migration, non-white migration, is so much more recent with the Europeans. People in my generation, every one of them grew up in an all-white Europe. And so also, you just don't have these generation after generation after generation. You don't have people who are there originally. They are the native people. And you don't have people who are brought against their will. Every one of them is voluntarily there, legally or illegally, many of them illegally. And so I think psychologically and historically, they are in a better position to say, look, fellas, we made a mistake. And for survival purposes, you've got to go. And you can go peacefully, or we can give you a push. And if a gentle push doesn't do it, you're going to get a harder push. Now, to me, the whole European situation, if, for example, you are a non-white living in Germany and you hear about these identitarians, well, who is telling you that the identitarians are good guys? Nobody. The government, the media, the churches, the intellectuals, the universities, everybody says, hey, these identitarians, these guys who want you out, they are the scum of the earth. That must be so comforting for them. But if you could change the narrative, one of those terms I don't like, but if these institutions begin to agree, look, this was a mistake, and for our survival, you need to go. I think once the zeitgeist shifts, once the general message these non-whites get is that, well, you are not going to be part of our civilization. A lot of them are going to go on their own.
Yeah, I think so too.
People
And it's already
don't-
started in some ways.
Yes,
I mean, I think it was Denmark was already pushing a lot of these. And what was interesting about Denmark is it was the Social Democrats who actually led the way in pushing back some of these. And you had all these hysterical articles, like they were taking some of the immigrants' property away and things like that. And it was like, but this is a mainstream government doing it.
Right.
This is a center-left government doing it.
Well, Denmark has been so committed to social justice and the social welfare system, they very early tumbled to the fact that these Muslims and Somalis and Moroccans just don't fit in. These guys are layabouts and chiselers, and they've decided in order to keep our social welfare system going, it's got to be Danes. Now, I wish they got much, much, much more play for this point of view. But yeah, when people would show up seeking asylum, they'd say, "Oh, that ring on your finger, that looks like it could be worth several thousand. I think we're gonna take that. We're gonna if we're gonna be giving you checks, we're gonna make sure that we've got your assets. I think that's great." And of course, people said, "Oh, that's like shaving the hair off the women in the Nazi concentration." Too bad. Too bad. The Danes have been really very good about that. I'm very proud of them. But all of the other Scandinavian countries, then of course Sweden is the worst. The Norwegians are actually moving in a good direction, and I would love to be in Norway over the weekend, but instead they asked me to record a little video address, which I was happy to do.
Oh, great. So you will be speaking to them at least in that way.
Yes, I will be present in video. By the way, I was present in the same way at a Remigration Summit in Spain. That was about a month and a half ago. And I made my very first talk in Spanish. I got Grok to translate it for me, and so I gibbered and jabbered in Spanish. It was a lot of fun. So now I've given remigration type talks in 3 languages. I'm not bragging. Anyway.
Well, notice that with Spain, the Vox, I think there were some people from the Vox Party who were at the Remigration Summit, and of course, one of the things when I noticed with that, it wasn't just them; it was the Alternative for Germany, and there were some people from some of these other parties.
Yes.
I mean, one of the things that it's certainly we've been to plenty of meetings where there's an international presence.
Yes.
But now we're dealing with people who have a significant political presence within their own countries, and they're not running for cover, which is always the critical thing.
Right. See, that is the aspect of it that makes their political system so different from ours. They've actually got parties in some of the really wide-awake countries that use the word remigration. And one of the things that I did while I was in Porto, I interviewed 4 of the guys that I think are absolute key players in the remigration movement. And one of them was Martin Zellner. You know, that Zellner, his name's pronounced Zellner, Martin Zellner, that is one smart guy. I must tell you, the more I get to know him, the more I respect him. But like so many of these young people, not only is he smart and committed, charismatic, that guy is as dedicated as the day is long. But one of the things that he has a very intelligent analysis of the political system in Europe in his really wonderful book called Regime Change from the Right. I finally got around to reading it. It's a year or 2 old. I reviewed it for American Renaissance, and I'd always known that this guy was a charismatic orator, an organizer, a guy who can really engineer the most dramatic banner drops. He is a sophisticated political theorist. And he has really done a good job of describing this dynamic that we do not see, namely a party that the media call far right. But those parties get distracted, like the National Rally in France, and to some degree the Vlaams Belang in Belgium. They want to get more votes. And in order to get more votes, they're always tempted to water down their message. And so there has to be this dynamic tension between what Zellner calls the movement space, or the remigration movement outside of politics, and the guys who are in politics. And he describes this so effectively and so convincingly. That guy has really thought it through. And I think one of the best interviews I've ever conducted was a conversation that I had with Zellner that we're going to put up on the Amarin page and all of our various sites probably within the next couple of days. He is, again, again, the more I get to know that guy, the more I admire and respect him.
Yeah, I should note, too, that not only does he have that book, but I think he just has a book that just came out from Passage Press called Remigration, which I'll be picking up very soon. Hope to have him on the show again to talk about it.
Yes. Now, you had Greg Bovino on your show, and also, I don't know if I believe in the past you've had Andrea Ballarati.
I did.
Yes,
that was when we had him on the day when the Italian government was taking all these measures against him, and he appealed to help on X.
Yes. Well, he was there, and I had a sit-down interview with him. I had rented this little Airbnb right in the heart of touristy Porto, Portugal, and I checked out all the photographs of the thing and say, okay, how can we move the furniture to make it look like we've got something like
right.
Yes. And so we moved all the furniture around, and so I had sit-down interviews with Ballarati and with Gonçalves. He is the head of the Reconquista movement in Portugal. I'd attended one of his conferences in Porto before. He was sort of the host of the organization. Zellner, and also the one boomer, the one guy from my generation who was invited to speak, and that was Jean-Yves Le Gallou.
Right. And I met him because he spoke at American Renaissance in the past.
Yes, exactly right. And I was expecting him to be willing to speak English, but he wanted to speak French. So our interview was in French, and I'm not sure quite what I'm going to do. I guess maybe we can put in translation.
AI does wonderful things these days.
Yes.
I should note real quick, Folk First with $5, he says, white solidarity rising. Hell yeah, it is. He also gifted 2 gift subscriptions to Identity Politics. Thank you, Folk First. So I am looking forward to that. And you can translate these sorts of things with AI. You can even do it with in that voice in English or whatever the other language is, so it looks kind of seamless.
Well, I think what we'll do is we'll just put in. See, I'm speaking French too, so what we're going to have to have. What we're going to have is.
Well, yeah, but you actually speak French. That doesn't do me any good.
Well, exactly. but the listener, the American listener, most of my work is geared towards English-speaking listeners, and I told him, look, I'm going to ask you questions that, from a French point of view, are going to sound kind of boneheaded, things that every Frenchman would know. But he says, no. I'm going to speak French. Well, and he was, interestingly enough, the only guy who spoke in a language other than English, and he was interpreted on the spot. So it was Vive la France for Jean-Yves Le Gallou, but he's actually older than I am. And do you know, this came out in the interview, I didn't realize that what woke him up was in 1968, the Enoch Powell Rivers of Blood speech.
Really? A speech from an Englishman woke him up.
Exactly. Well,
that's pretty wild.
Apparently that got a fair amount of coverage in the French press. He was a student at the time, and he read that, and a light bulb went off in his brain, and he said, this guy got it right.
You would think it would be Algeria or any of the things that the French far right has normally been associated with, but
that had colonization involved in it,
and
it was from a certain moral point of view,
right?
You could say,
right, and also it was racially weird. I mean, what de Gaulle said was really what the far right was advocating, was making the Muslims French. And one of the reasons de Gaulle used to justify getting out of Algeria, and I think he was proven wrong in the long run, but the reasoning is sound, is that, look, we make these people French, eventually they're going to outnumber us.
Oh, yeah.
Now, of course, the problem is that they ended up coming anyway, but in a way, that's not really his fault.
No, it's not his fault. And he's famous for this remark. This is conveyed by one of his assistants, Alain Pierrefitte, and it's something that all the identitarians quote, but that everybody else in France who claims to love de Gaulle pretends he never said.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing now, but you've heard this quote. He says,
the one his hometown?
Yes, it ends with his hometown, but he says, France is a nation of the white race, of the Catholic religion, and yes, a few non-whites can be citizens, but if enough of them come, then my hometown, which is Colombe, the 2 churches, Colombe les 2 églises, is going to end up being called Colombe, the 2 mosques, Colombe les 2 mosquées. And this is one of the famous things that he said that people would prefer to forget. In any case, that guy understood. And I just wish more French people understood that today. But no, the conference, I met all kinds of brand new people. I met a Spaniard who knows all about the Valley of the Fallen, and he's dying to take me and any of my friends on a tour of the Valley of the Fallen. I would love to go. He says it's his favorite place in the whole world.
Oh God, what they did to it though makes me furious. Removing General Franco and Jose Antonio Primo de Rivera.
Well, he says everyone has heard that it's all tumbled down and they're not maintaining it, but it's actually in better shape than you would expect. So it's not going to fall into ruins like the pyramids. But anyway, I met that guy, and then I met a number of charming ladies. So that's a great thing about the movement.
What would you say?
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt, but it's an important thing because this is something, and I'm going to advance kind of a premise here. I noticed that with the European movements, you tend to have a better balance between men and women in terms of the share of the population that goes up. Did you notice that here, or was it mostly guys?
It's mostly guys. But the women are almost uniformly good looking. And this is the first time I ever met Eva Vlandingerbroek. You've seen photographs of her. She's just as much of a knockout in person as she is in her photographs or videos. But as I said,
good crossover appeal to American conservatives, too, because they've all seen her on Fox News and everything else. That's what I thought was really significant about this, is that you had... not to put people in boxes and labels and everything else, but what was the interesting things about the Remigration Summit is you had a pretty broad spectrum in terms of ideology. You had some guys who I would consider a bit more hard-edged, and then some other people who were just kind of elected politicians, and then someone like her who... Frankly, 2-3 years ago, she would have been known as basically a conservative talking about farm policies in the Netherlands on Fox News. And now everybody's kind of consolidating behind an agenda. Nobody's freaking out about being associated with this person or that person. Everybody was put together in a pretty professional way. And and you actually have like a policy thing now because you have the Institute for Remigration.
Well, see, this is one of Martin Sellner's ideas that he outlines, I think, very deftly and convincingly in Regime Change from the Right. And it's the idea that we need to unite behind one primary objective.
Right.
One primary objective. And he said something that I've been saying in a somewhat more clumsy way. He says, look, I know some of you think that sound money is important. I know that some of you think that Catholicism or paganism or traditional marriage is important. Look, all of these are important, but we have to unite on one thing that's most important, and that is remigration. And that, to me, is part of the genius of these remigration summits. You get all of these people who have various ideas from various political tendencies. They can agree on the objective, and that is to save our nations. Once we've done that, the way I put it is, once we have our own country, then we can work out all our other problems. But we have to do this. This is urgent. That's got to be done now. And Zellner, I think, has done a brilliant job of making this the centerpiece of our movement today, right now.
Do you think that his country, Austria, is the first one where we're going to see a pro-remigration government actually get elected? That the polls suggest that they've got a shot.
He says that. Nobody can know for sure. He thinks it's got as good a chance as any. Interestingly enough, Austria was not as rigorously denazified as Germany, despite the fact that the chief was from Austria, but be that as it may. It wasn't beaten to death quite the way the Germans were. And so I don't know what all the combination of factors are. He would know better than I. But yeah, he thinks Austria, and if one nation really starts doing it, and it's not strangled by the EU in some way, then I think the dominoes will begin to fall. So, it was really, really 100% a great experience. And I'm looking forward to posting all of those 4 interviews that I mentioned. Zellner, Gonsalves, Ballarati, and Jean-Yves Le Gallou. Those are guys from four different nations, really some of the key men. And I must say, maybe I am romanticizing some of these guys, but what I have seen of this younger generation of identitarian leaders in Europe, I would say that if these guys are not great already, they have the potential for true greatness, and that's what we'll need. I just hope that always you get a guy like Jean-Marie Le Pen, or you get a guy like who is that Italian guy who seemed so promising at one point. In any case, they will all mess up in some way, do something cuckoo or stupid or something with a woman, and that's always a risk. But if these guys can stay on track, I think they have potential for real greatness. I'm very optimistic about it.
One thing, I mean, we'll get into the overall European situation, but I mean, we do need to talk about the other thing that happened, which is, of course, what happened in France. Now, but before we even get into that,
yes.
I mean, we should talk a little bit about where it might go. You mentioned, could the EU stop it? Well, there's a flip side to that too, which is what if the EU itself tilts? I mean, there's the old saying, France sneezes, Europe catches cold. I've always said that if there's one country that flips and that you need to flip, it's France. And right now, it looks pretty promising as far as the presidential election goes.
Well, in the three major countries, Britain isn't in the EU anymore.
Right.
But Reform, top of the polls. National Rally in France, top of the polls. In Germany, AfD, top of the polls. And in Austria, Freedom Party, top of the polls. Now, to me, it is the German and the Austrians that are most promising. The National Rally with Marine Le Pen.
Moderated too much.
She has just gotten too enamored with electoral politics. And as you know, she is temporarily barred from running.
Right, which is why Bardella, right?
Jordan Bardella, her number 2 guy, he is probably more likely to run. I mean, if she's cleared of these charges, I mean, there is no question that she used European Union funds that were for European Union staff. You got these Euro MPs, but they weren't doing anything. And so they took this money that's supposed to pay for Euro MPs, and she paid for local work in France. You're not supposed to do that. A lot of the European parties do, but the National Rally.
Yeah, we can't do that. That's how it always goes. Yeah.
But in defense of the circumstances, she was particularly flagrant about it, and they had text messages. And when they put her on trial, her defense, I think, and a lot of identitarians agree, was very stupid. She did not say, "Oh, we just didn't understand, and we promised never to do it again," and I understand the gravity of the situation. She was just, well, too bad. Everybody does it, and it's just perfectly fine. Her defense was really stick her thumb in the eye of the judges, and I think that contributed seriously to her being fined quite considerably and being told, you can't run for election for the next however many years it is. And if that ban on running is not overturned by the courts, she can't stand for president in the 2027 election. On the other hand, all my identitarian comrades in France say that's just as well, because Jordan Bardella is probably stauncher than she. Now, to what extent, once he's president, if he makes it to be president, he'll come out really two-fisted, bare-knuckled, a remigrationist is yet to be seen. But no, France, I mean, it's quite remarkable. All of these parties are called far right by the media. And far right often is, pretty good on some of the issues, but not quite where we want them. But it's remarkable. The 4 major countries in Europe like that are far right are polling number 1. So these are exciting. Of course, it's funny. In Europe, because you've got so much party fragmentation, you can say, wow, AfD is number 1. And then you say, what? They're polling 27%? Well, that's all it takes to be number 1.
Right.
So, but then
you get the grand coalition against them, and they don't actually get to do anything and all this. We complain about the American system, but I mean, sometimes you win an election in Europe and somehow you end up with nothing.
Yes. Well, the AfD will have to cobble together some kind of coalition, just the way the Freedom Party will. But if there are enough people and if the mood shifts sufficiently, then the other parties will have no choice but to play ball. So this is a very, very exciting time in Europe. I mean, I think it's an exciting time in the United States. It's an exciting time around the world. But as you know, I'm easily overexcited.
You're the white-pilled staff member at American Renaissance. I'm the mopey black-pilled guy.
Oh, by the way, Mr. Blackpill, Martin Sellner, he agrees with me on the intentions of most of our opponents. He's not convinced that they're evil. He says they're deluded, but they think they're on the side of the angels. We got to straighten them out. Anyway, just to score one point, it's our friendly dialogue on this subject that will probably never end.
Right.
But you want to jump over
get
to
into
France.
Right. I mean, we should talk about what happened in that last thing, because I have to admit I was kind of surprised by it, because it wasn't even, it's not like you arranged the meeting. It's not like you. No. And also, when you look at the polls, when you look at how strong the far right is in France, when you look at the fact that they're still dealing with the aftermath of the murder of that young activist Canton, and you have these groups marching around doing all these sorts of things, and the left is, broadly speaking, on the defensive, seems like a pretty extraordinary move to break up a meeting like that.
Well, it was especially surprising because of what had happened on the Tuesday before the Wednesday meeting. On Tuesday, I spent 3 delightful hours signing copies of the French translation of my book, If We Do Nothing, in an identitarian bookstore right in the heart of Paris. Now, Mr. DeAnna, believe it or not, there are at least 2 bookstores, above ground bookstores in Paris that stock my books. And it's very hard to imagine a bookstore anywhere in the United States stocking books by you or me or Greg Johnson or all of the great Europeans, and they don't have much of a problem. And they are identitarian bookstores. They make no bones about it. That's all they sell. And they're above ground, and occasionally, somebody will throw a tomato at them, but that's about the size of it. No, moreover, my book signing was advertised, a Jared Taylor book signing from 5 to 7. Well, there were so many people, and they had so much fun, it went from 5 to 8. We had a great time, publicly advertised, not a hint of a disturbance. I tell you, it was great. I've never had that experience in a bookstore ever in my life, certainly not in the United States. So I thought, wow, this is a country where you can breathe the air. Wow, what a great place. Well, as it turns out, the very next day, I was scheduled to speak to a group called Les Natifs, and that means the natives. Well, as it happens, I hadn't looked very carefully into them because I'd been approached at the first Remigration Summit by this really sharp young guy who said, look, next time you're in Paris, I'm going to arrange a talk for you. I said, great, I'll go to Paris. Well, Les Natifs are part of what was left after the French version of Generation Identity was ordered demobilized by the French state. The French state has the power to do that. If they think that a group is liable to be committing hate crimes or they get a little too frisky, too big in their britches, the French state can say, look, this is an illegal group, and you've got to disband. Well, what happened is it was a national group, and it rebanded in individual groups. Les Natifs is the name of the fragment that is in Paris, and then there are other different names all around the country doing generally the same things. Now, they have not been frisky enough to be banned per se, but they are, as the guy who runs Les Natifs told me, known to the police. Moreover, there was a deputy, that is to say, the equivalent of a French congressman of that utterly crazy party, La France
the LFI,
Insoumise, LFI,
right.
run by
Mélenchon, right?
Utterly, I talked to a number of Frenchmen about this guy. He's sure enough French, but he apparently really he talks about the new France. The new France is going to be composed of nothing but non-whites, and he's all for it. In any case, this is a white deputy for that party, wrote a letter to the Ministry of the Interior. And he said, dear minister, I've heard that Les Natifs, those swine, have invited an American named Jared Taylor, also a swine, to hold a meeting. Please squelch it. Now, this was, maybe a week before I even showed up. Well, Les Natifs said to me, this guy writes letters like that every time the Iliad Institute, that's Jean-Yves Gallou's outfit, holds a meeting. He does this all the time and nothing ever comes of it. I said, well, okay. I didn't much like the sound of that. I've never had the equivalent of a congressman write to the equivalent of Pam Bondi or the Justice Department saying, this guy is so evil, squelch his meeting. I thought that was a first. And well, what happened is we were supposed to meet at 8 p.m. in this undisclosed location in Paris. Well, the Paris police tracked down the guy who is the head of Les Natifs in a cafe, not even in his own restaurant, before the place had been announced, and said, by order of the prefecture of police of the city of Paris, you ain't holding this meeting in Paris. Well, the kind of organizers they are, this guy quickly got on the horn and he rounded up a meeting in a different department, in the neighboring department of Yvelines. Yvelines is the French department where you will find Versailles, where the old Bourbon Palace is located. And so he said he had this email list and he sent it out to people and said, okay, we've shifted and we're going to be meeting at such a place. And so we all gathered in Versailles. And I had been introduced and I was just about to start my remarks when in marched the police. And the policeman says,
so they infiltrated, or do you think they were spying on you?
See, I'll get to that later. There's some interesting theories about that. So the policeman, you get two armed policemen. Now, I'm used to these crazies trying to shut me up, but this is the first time that a guy with a badge and a pistol on his hip tried to shut me up. That's a kind of a different experience. So he walks up to me and says, "Vous êtes Monsieur Jarret-Taylor?" I said, "Yeah, that's who I am." So he showed some ID, and I signed this multi-page document, which I later read, which explains why they saw fit to shut the meeting down. And it'll be interesting to talk about that because it's quite an Orwellian little piece of argumentation. In any case, so long as we shut the meeting down, then that was okay. Nobody was arrested. I wasn't hauled off in handcuffs. I could just imagine myself being thrown into some abominable jail in Paris, being gangbuggered by Arabs and Africans. But fortunately, that didn't happen. They just, you're free to go, so long as you don't hold a meeting. So we walked across the street to another bar and had a very pleasant evening of conversation and drinks, but I did not give my talk. So the next day, I had lunch with the leader of the Les Natifs, the natives, and I said, "You must have had a leak. You must have had a security leak." He says, "No, I don't think that's what happened." He says, "How do you think they found me in that cafe before I'd even announced the location?" And he says, "They probably are tracking my movements on my cell phone all the time." And as soon as enough of us, and several of his group, he says, we are known to the police, several of his group are probably being tracked all the time. And once they showed up in Versailles, they knew where to send the police. And the police, by the way, had taken their document and rejigged it so that it was by order of the prefecture of police of Yvelines, the prefecture involved. That's pretty snappy police work when you think about it. They had time to redo the document and get the person who represents the prefecture of police in the neighboring department to sign it and serve it on me and break up the meeting.
Yeah, the only way you could avoid that is if you sent everybody, you'd have to literally send everybody to a redirect point, then collect their cell phones.
Exactly.
And then send them to another place and then somehow be like, okay, now go back here and get your cell phones. But of course, then they would just go to the place where they have the cell phones and that guy would have to run away or do whatever.
Or, I don't know, they could put their cell phones in these Faraday bags or whatever it is.
Right.
The thing is, if they think they're that attract that heavily, you'd think they'd have some trick, they'd put their phones in a bag. But what it boils down to is Les Natifs, who are known to the police, had no idea that the police would go to such trouble to shut down what was an entirely peaceful get-together. Now, what they like to do is like to demonstrate. They were out there demonstrating for Quentin, the guy who'd been killed. Whenever there's some sort of notorious anti-white crime, they're out there roaring around, and the police don't like them. So Some of my French comrades have said, well, it was probably a mistake to accept an invitation by a group that is so known and surveilled by the police. But one thing I thought, well, this is interesting. Well, okay, first of all, let's get to the document that they composed in which they explained why
I do want to get to that. And guys, I know you guys are sending in some super chats. We'll get to those in a second. Actually, let me just ask you one, just because it was something you asked before. There were a couple ones about AI and things like that, but we'll return to those. But this is from Haseo Naka 1. Thank you for the $2 donation. Did you or Jared ask local French Italians how they have openly nationalist bookstores and bars? How do they avoid far-left violence? Well, they don't sometimes. What should I know if I wanted to start one myself? I can just speak to Casa Pound real quick. One thing that they did with that is they essentially had people working for free, essentially. I mean, step one, have a group with the kind of dedication where people are just expected to put in the time for very little compensation or no compensation, and that allows you to do this kind of thing. But that's almost like step one.
That doesn't explain why they don't have some kind of sledgehammer attack every night.
Oh, well, that's a separate point. But yes, you still have to deal with that.
That's the main point. That's what I don't understand. If you had a bookstore in Chicago or New York City or even, I don't know, some sort of out-of-the-way place, you'd have it spray painted every night. You'd have fire bombings. You'd have people being beaten up going into or out of it. I think it'd be just much more difficult to do. But that doesn't seem to be a problem in France. Also, when I was in the university town of Anvers, when I was in France the last time, I was invited by a student group to give a talk. They have their own little building. Well, that's actually a good-sized building. And in the basement, what used to be a storage place for barrels of wine, they have a place where about 50 people can sit down, and I give a talk, and then we went off to their bar. It's a bar just for them and their friends. It's kind of like a speakeasy. You have to give the secret sign even to be let in. And something like that, I just cannot imagine the Antifa not, again, sledgehammer attacks, spray paint, beat up guys.
I think it's a
different climate.
Yeah, I think, because I've thought about this a lot, I think what actually separates it, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, but this is the best explanation I can come up with, is how much more litigious America is in terms of lawsuits and everything else. Because let's say people showed that you did something here. You set something up, you guarded it even, and Antifa showed up and they tried to attack it, and you physically fought them off. Well, we know how that would happen. You'd get sued, law enforcement, and we don't have to. This is not like me coming up with it. I mean, the Proud Boys, which I think a lot of people watching this would consider to be like well to our left. We all remember what happened in New York City when they got into a fight with Antifa, and literally only they got arrested. They didn't even charge it. Same thing with Rob Rundo. You remember that fight with the Rise Above movement and everything else? They hounded him through the courts. They hounded him around the world. For years. They didn't even bother with the Antifa, even though they were on camera too. In fact, they used those Antifa web postings as part of the court filings against him. And maybe it's just a question of, in Europe, yes, they don't have free speech, but they also, because they just have a greater idea of like the state and only the state has to be in charge, that if any group outside the state does something, they just come down on them harder. That's the only explanation I can come up with.
Well, none of it really makes sense, because occasionally they do have some Antifa that'll whoop about this. And the same group that invited me to speak in the university town of Anvers that I was talking about has just invited Jean-Yves Le Gallou, the Frenchman I was talking about before, to come give a talk to the same group. And you've got these Antifa people who are screaming and saying, we got to think of some way to keep it from happening. But they do nothing. And it doesn't require 1,000 policemen to prevent it from happening. I just don't understand it. There's got to be an explanation, but I don't know what it is. In any case.
That document.
So, yes, I was really quite chuffed by that. I thought, wow, as I say, this is a country you can breathe the air of freedom. Well, no. Well, what does the document say? The document says that I was very likely to pronounce words that would provoke an immaterial disturbance of the public order. Immaterial. By that, they mean a non-physical disturbance. A material disturbance is looting, rioting, arson, the stuff they get all the time from their delightful...
Nobody cares about that. Yeah. That's not even a crime anymore.
Well, they do care about that. I mean, remember, last time when Paris Saint-Germain beat Arsenal, they did arrest several hundred rioters. When's the last time you heard of several hundred rioters being arrested in the United States?
Fair point.
Yeah,
Right.
they do arrest them. They don't like it. But they said, there are immaterial disturbances and material disturbances. Well, an immaterial disturbance, well, they said there was a serious risk of racist crimes, and I was going to commit crimes against incitement of hatred. Now, they went to the trouble. Somebody actually went through my X feed, and somebody looked into my history. Somebody went all the way back to the color of crime. That was that report we issued in 1999. And they quoted the color of crime, and it said, you said in this color of crime that of all of the interracial crimes of violence between blacks and whites commit 90%. Now, it did not say that's not true. It did not say, where did you get those sources? Having said that was sufficient, among other things.
You said blacks commit 90%.
What's that?
That's what you're saying.
I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Yes, I beg your pardon. Blacks commit 90% against whites. When you got blacks and whites, you got interracial crime. Blacks commit 90% and whites commit only 10%. This huge lopsided effect of black on white crime. And the mere fact of having pointed that out showed that I was probably going to say something racist. Also, the fact that they call me an adherent of the ideology of Renaud Camus, who promotes the idea of the Great Replacement.
Right.
So being a Renaud Camus fan is apparently some kind of potential crime. Also, they found an ex post in which I said, most people know that there are differences on average in IQ of the races, but most people are such cowards they won't say it publicly. That was no good. I said a couple of other things that seem innocuous to you and me, but my guess is that probably what excited them the most was my use of the word negritude. Now, perhaps this is an unkind thing to do, but occasionally people will ship these videos around of black people doing just eye-opening, hair-raising things, just astonishingly degenerate. And I got one, and somebody said, what do you call this? Well, smart aleck that I am, I said, I call it negritude. And my definition is degeneracy almost impossible to imagine in others. Well,
they didn't like that, did they?
Well, they quoted that. Now, you see, negritude is a perfectly respectable French word. It was cooked up in the 1930s and 40s by French-speaking Africans. And a Martiniquais who is black as tar, he's basically an African, named Aimé Césaire, and Léopold Senghor, who went on to be the first post-independence president of Senegal. And negritude was their way of taking a mildly pejorative French word, nègre, which is like our word, Negro. Assume Negro say today. I mean, Negro used to be a perfectly respectable way to talk about black people, but nowadays it's not. So you take nègre and then you turn it into negritude and make it a wonderful thing. It's just like so many homosexuals have taken the word queer, which was originally an insult, and it's a badge of honor now. Yes, we're queer. We're here. Deal with it. Yeah. In any case, this was a movement in the 30s. And actually, it's kind of funny. The English-speaking Africans laughed at it. I don't know if you've heard of the Nigerian playwright Wole Soyinka.
Yes, I have.
Anybody who's been through high school in the United States probably had to read his stuff.
Yeah, right.
In any case, he laughed at negritude. He says the tiger doesn't insist on his tigertude. He just pounces. Anyway, my guess is that was one of the things that upset them the most. So basically, I mean, if you read between the lines, what this charging document says is that the French police were very kindly protecting me from myself.
So they were doing you a favor.
They had excellent reason to think that I would say the kinds of things I've already said in the past, and if I did so, I would be committing a crime. And it is the state's responsibility to prevent foreseeable crimes, just like the statesman in Enoch Powell's view. You can foresee these catastrophes and head them off. So they cited no fewer than 7 legal documents, laws, and precedents going all the way back to the Declaration of the Rights of the Man and Citizen issued during the Revolution. And they said, and I just for fun, I looked up what it says about freedom of speech in the Declaration of Rights of Man. And it says freedom of speech is not to be abridged except in the case of disturbances of the public order. I didn't realize that was in the Declaration of Rights. In any case, that was their justification. They said, look, this guy Taylor, namely you have said things in the past that would be a crime to say. And if we turn you loose and you say these things, you could cause an immaterial breach in the public order. And then they want to talk about, what else did they talk about? Let's see. I could undermine national cohesion and I could violate the Republican
Pretty terrifying amount of power that you have.
I'll tell you, man, one single white American shows up and I can undermine national cohesion and the Republican tradition will be violated. But that's the way, tyrants are always clothing their tyranny in all these high-sounding words, human dignity, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, that was that. Now, so far, I haven't been told that I've been banned from France. And the only way they can ban me from France is by banning me from the entire Schengen group.
Schengen zone, right.
If that happens, I'm not going back to Europe for a while. The last time I heard of a serious ban was Mark Collett. You know him. He's with the Patriotic Alternative in Britain.
Right. He was on the show.
Do you know how long they banned him for?
5 years?
15.
15 years. I've never heard of that long.
No, I'd never heard of him that long. 15 years. Yes. I mean, he was heartbroken, as you can imagine. So I'm banned indefinitely from the United Kingdom, which is heartbreaking because that's where my ancestors are from. It's just one of these astonishing things. I love Europe. I love France. I had a great time in France. I was in Paris. I remember just how much I love that city. The countryside is beautiful. And people say, the French are so stuck up and nasty too, hate Americans. They like you if you speak French. And I speak French. I've always had a great time in France. I mean, England is sort of really my ancestral homeland. And I must say, although I despise the idea of the terrible wars that we spent fighting each other, I once set foot on HMS Victory. That was Nelson's flagship at the Battle of Trafalgar. And it's in Plymouth. I think it's in the port of Plymouth, and it's a museum ship now. It's in beautiful shape. If you're ever in Britain, you absolutely must go. A beautiful ship. And when I set foot on there, in my ears I could hear that final order: England expects every man to do his duty. And boy, if I'd been on that ship, I would have been prepared to kill Frenchmen. Sorry. I mean, I just have
the emperor over my shoulder. I can fear him glaring into the back of me.
Yep. I'm sorry, but still, no. I love France, and it would be mortifying to me to be banned from France.
But why do you think they did it? I mean, in terms of why now? Is it an act of fear? Because Macron supposedly is even maneuvering the government such that if the National Rally wins the election, they're not going to be able to do very much. I mean, it's sort of the way that some government bureaucrats arguably sabotaged President Trump during his first term.
Yes. Well, they're trying to pass a law in France that is really going to broaden the hate speech provisions. So that basically the whole political platform, even of the watered-down National Rally, could be against the law. But why now? I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. But my guess is they were trying to send a message, really, not so much to me, but to les natifs, the natives. And in that respect, as I said, yes, some of the other comrades of mine say, well, if you checked with us, I mean, I did check with some other French people. I said, look, here's this guy, he's with a group, and he's asked me to speak. What do you think? And one of my contacts says, well, I don't know him very well, but from what I know of him, he's a straight up guy. And, I've heard of his group, and they're really solid. But some are now ex post facto saying, well, maybe it was a little dodgy letting them arrange a talk for you. If it had been Jean-Yves Le Gallou, it probably would have gone better. But as far as the illegality of my talk, I sent my remarks to the magazine that is edited by Alain de Benoit. It's called Elements. And they published the whole thing. And so far as I know,
Nothing happened to him.
No, there have been no immaterial.
National cohesion has not been fatally undermined.
Apparently
The next
not.
French Civil War hasn't erupted already. I have to admit, I'm a little disappointed.
No immaterial disturbances of the public order on account of that. So I just don't know. You never know what is behind decisions like this, and we'll probably never know. But if I do get a Schengen ban, that would be very grievous for me.
Right.
I've been banned twice before, and I just feel as though I'm being cut off from the mother continent. As you know, when we were in Rome, I felt as though I was just I was thrilled by all of those Roman antiquities, all of the great things white people had done during the Italian Renaissance. I felt like I was just having my white man's batteries recharged every step I took, walking through the streets of Rome. It's just a wonderful experience. And I had a plan. I was planning to be in Paris for this thing coming up in November. They're going to have a remigration meeting. Zellner will be there. Jean-Yves Le Gallou will be there. Now it looks like I probably can't go. And I was planning to be probably in Europe next April too. So,
well, we'll see. I mean, nothing's happened yet. I mean, as far as
the thing is, they don't tell you. That's what's so
right.
That's what's so nasty about it.
You show up at the airport, and it's only then.
You show up at the airport. Now, I did eventually find a way. When the Poles put the kibosh on my European travel, what I had to do was give a Pole power of attorney. And he went through a very complicated rigmarole that involved having documents translated into Polish, and paying revenue stamps and getting them pasted onto documents. And so he could get out of the Ministry of Foreigners, which is what they call one of their organizations there. The Ministry of Foreigners could give him my status, banned, not banned. They would not say why he was ever banned, but he determined that way that I was in a not banned status. So what I'll probably do is maybe after a month or two has gone by, and if the French state has finally made up its mind, okay, we're going to really put the screws on this Monsieur Jared Taylor, then I'll find out if I'm banned or not. I think that's the way I will proceed. But I don't think they're going to be like the British, who had the good manners to say, "Well, dear Mr. Taylor, don't bother to come." Right. I mean, you got to respect that. I mean, if they're going to be jerks, at least they're going to be polite about it.
Right. There's a way things can be done, right?
Yes.
Even if I'm going to be executed, at least obey the forms.
That's right. I can wear a necktie.
Be white about it.
I can wear a necktie to my next execution. So.
Right. So there's a lot of super chats to go through, and I hope we get some more in a bit. But one last question before we get into them real quick, just about the overall European situation.
Yes.
Obviously, you've got what's going on in Belfast recently. It does seem that the political situation, and I know all these people are saying, oh, it's the Irish. Well, it's not the Irish. It's Northern Ireland. I mean, if insofar as the people on the streets, it seems to be the loyalists who are actually spearheading this, although we could have some Irish Catholics joining in too. Ironically enough, it seems to be that the immigration issue could be the thing that finally settles the loyalist Republican divide in Ireland, because it's like that meme, we're different, but we are more common. We have more in common than we previously thought.
Yeah.
Where do you see it going in the United Kingdom? Because a couple years back, I think it was basically consensus within the movement that the UK was probably in the most down bad state, so to speak, in terms of there was just nothing happening. Everybody was trying to get pumped up for something. And even Farage is not all that great. I mean, he was White Renegade of the Year in my take, a couple years back.
Yes.
But now you have Restore. You have Farage sounding a lot better. I mean, opportunism, sure, but he's saying these things, winning in the polls.
Yes.
And now in Belfast, you have people taking to the streets, and this murder of Henry Nowak seems to have just infuriated everybody, and it's the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, I just don't think there's any going back after this.
Well, specifically in the Belfast business, I have been shocked to learn that the Catholics and Protestants still have so much animosity that in many cases they can't even get together to fight third world immigration. This is grievous to me. Right. And just on a side note, I'm going to be going to the annual Congress of the Irish National Party. These are good lads. But apparently, if they are even seen to be cooperated with any kind of English or British organization, I mean, much as they might like the people involved, it looks bad for them politically. They want to get people in office. And
Right.
if it can be shown that they are playing footsie for any reason with the English, it's bad for them politically. I was very surprised to hear this. I mean, it was like, I mean, I'll never forget in 2014, I think I've told you this story before, when I was in Hungary. I'm talking to the Hungarian comrades, and they can't decide who do we hate more, the Slovaks, the Romanians. Fellas, you got to get over that. Oh, no, we hate these people. The Treaty of Trianon. Oh, our country was destroyed. Okay, but, anyway. So it's a problem there. And I hope to heck that they get over it. Apparently, this is something that the young people understand. It's my generation that is still fighting the battle of the Boyne.
Right.
Those guys just can't get over it. Now, as far as what's going to happen in Britain, to me, it's a little bit like May 25th, 2020. As you know, that is when George Floyd went to his reward. And I would never have guessed that the country would go into months of collective insanity. And I thought, this is the end. The country's just utterly unsalvageable. But that seems to have been, we hit bottom. And after hitting bottom, we have come back quite a way, Mr. DeAnna.
We have.
The election of Donald Trump is an astonishing thing. And the kind of things that we are saying, the number of people who are saying them, compared to where we were May 25th, 2020, we have come a very long way. And it may be that Britain is going through a similar kind of bounce back. My impression was the same as yours. Everyone seemed to think, oh my gosh, the Brits, what a bunch of spineless, invertebrate losers. They're never going to go anywhere. Maybe not. And
I mean, I think they're ahead of us at this point in terms of the fact that they've got elected officials running for this part. I mean, Restore is already, they did it in a different name, and it was like, Great Yarmouth or Great Yarmouth First or something, but they got their own guys elected.
Well, but that was only at the city council level. They've got nobody.
How many pro-white city council members do you know?
Well, under BNP, they had hundreds.
That's true.
Now, you're talking about the United States.
I'm talking about the United States, yeah.
Yes, of course. Now, yes, that is all very, very good. And Farage, everybody, all of these kind of limp-wristed, semi-identitarians, their backbones stiffen when they get a serious challenge from their right. So I don't know. Maybe Restore has to be the sacrificial animal to put a little gumption into Nigel Farage's brain. I do not trust that guy myself. I think he's a slippery opportunist. I think most of the racially wide awake people feel that way. But if to the extent that he's willing to carry our flag, then we've got to support him. Certainly, he's going to be better than that Nigerian who runs the Conservative Party.
I mean, it seems to me that reform is just going to eat the Tories, and then they become the Tories.
Yes.
I mean, but the problem, of course, like what did I mean, when you look at the Boris wave of immigration after Brexit and everything else, which was almost done to punish the British people, which was weird, of course, because Boris Johnson supported Brexit.
Yes.
I mean, the danger is that Farage gets in there, and then nothing happens.
Exactly.
I mean, look at Maloney, right? I mean, when Maloney was elected in Italy, the entire English language press, which is the worst press in the world, was screaming that it was the second coming of Mussolini, and then nothing happened.
But even a lot of Italians had pretty high hopes for Giorgia Meloni. I remember there were those speeches in which she was quoted verbatim. I am a Christian. I am a white woman. Or I am a European. I am a Christian.
Right.
That sounded pretty good to me. Well, that got her over the that got her past the post, and then So I don't know. White people have been betrayed so many times, and that, of course, back to Martin Sellner and his book.
Yeah, that's why you got to have both. You got to have the force inside politics, and you got to have the force outside it.
The force outside politics has got to be constantly breaking taboos, and as soon as the taboos breaking, then it's got to force the politicians to step into that new terrain and keep them honest. So I don't know. Of course, you and I are clearly, if we had a choice, we would put restore in power. And everything that that guy is saying, it sounds really first rate to me.
Yeah, I mean, certainly want Rupert Lowe to be Lord Protector. That's probably the only way forward.
Lord Protector. Well, you're really going radical, aren't you? Whose head are we going to cut off this time, huh?
I mean, I still have some hope of getting into Britain someday, so I'm not answering that question.
I know there are plenty of heads you'd cut off if we're up to you.
I'm a sensible centrist. I don't know what you're talking about.
Very good.
See, I'm learning. Yeah, okay. I'm trying really hard.
Well, I sure hope you don't get banned. That would just,
suck.
It's terrible. And you had a wonderful time in Rome when we were there together.
Yeah,
and you roared all around Europe and Germany to be cut off from all of that, and all those wonderful comrades. I tell you, it's like the young people I meet here in. Well, I won't tell you exactly where I am because it's best for people not know. But local politics here, the young Republicans are just 180 degrees going the other way on race compared to the old Republicans. And they're the future of the party.
Do you think, though, that this is changing? I mean, not to lump people in or put words in their mouth or anything else, but you do see a tendency of older Republicans, older conservatives, people within the conservative movement, someone like Matt Walsh, for example, who 5 years ago was saying, Albert Armory, whatever his name was just jogging on the construction site, and this is something men do, and all this kind of stuff, and giving the establishment narrative on Floyd and all the rest of it. Now he's saying stuff that would have gotten me fired at LI 15 years ago.
Matt Walsh,
you have a lot of older people. I mean, we all are familiar with the phenomenon of the Boomerwaffen, the people who are saying really crazy things on Facebook that you and I wouldn't say because it's like, hey, you actually can't say that. But like they just go out there guns blazing, and this is not something you would have seen a couple years back. I think older Americans are getting more radicalized.
That's a you and on me. Boomerwaffen? Okay. Well, I'm not quite ready to be throwing up stiff arm salutes.
I'm not lumping you in, but I am saying that the serious phenomenon, though, is like something where you'll see a normal conservative on Facebook, and I'm not endorsing this. I'm just saying this is the kind of thing you see where they'll just say something like, "We need to hang all these people," and like they think you can just like say that, and it's like, well, you're actually not allowed to say stuff like that, but they'll just say it. But here's the thing: it's not people who are coming out of like radical movements. It's not people who have been like reading whatever website for 10 years. It's like the chair of whatever local GOP precinct or something. And they don't understand like why people are going nuts. But at a certain point, it just becomes normalized. Now, of course, the thing that I would push back on is on the left, I think they've kind of radicalized too. I mean, think of how many normal people, teachers, government workers, were just saying, it's good Charlie Kirk died. We need to do that to more people. I mean, how many people did you see, like nurses at their workplace doing TikTok videos saying this is good?
Of course, we don't really know how many. And the ones that said so were rigorously hunted down and exposed. All of these things, it's very, very difficult. You try to take the temperature of the general populace, and it becomes increasingly difficult. But no, there is no question that older Republicans, once they are exposed to some of these ideas, they no longer shriek and run from the room. That's certainly true. Some of them are not prepared to really fly the flag, but the younger ones are, and that's where I see that's the future. It's very, very encouraging. And back to Belfast. I thought it was fascinating reading the New York Times coverage of all of this. And they had all of these sob stories about some lovely African nurses in the National Health Service who, we're being chased out of our homes, and this is so horrible. And all of the people in authority saying, this is despicable. This is worse than the attack on this poor guy who nearly got his head cut off. Well, I'm not endorsing violence. But if the government betrays the people will react. That is the long and the short of it. And everybody in an official position was denouncing Elon Musk for saying that this is a result of immigration. How can you deny it?
Right.
That guy was a Sudanese. He doesn't belong in Britain. He should never have been there. Without immigration, he wouldn't have been there. Without immigration, he wouldn't have been there, and this guy wouldn't have had his head nearly chopped off. I mean,
Right.
this is undeniable. And ordinary people are fed up. Keith Woods has a cameraman, Roddy Murray. I don't know if you've ever met him.
Yeah.
He was in Rome. Very good guy. He was in Belfast interviewing people. And just the ordinary comments were great. Basically,
that's what I mean. Like
yes,
ordinary people, the way they just kind of.
Yes,
because I mean, I think even people in like our movement are used to, especially people who are a bit older, and we're used to sort of like looking over our shoulder. Like, no, you have to express it with a bit of irony. You have to do it in this roundabout way. They just come out and say it.
Yes. We've had fucking enough. And no, yeah, out. Great stuff. And as I say, they look perfectly ordinary Irish. Now, but you were talking about Matt Walsh. I don't know if you saw a remarkable tweet that, this is what happens when you get old. Woods, what is that guy? The libertarian guy who was with the Mises Institute. For heaven's sake.
Not Rothbard, was it, or anybody like that?
Well,
if you want to look it up real quick, I'll go into some of these super chats real quick, and we're going to go through all of them. But if anybody wants to send in more, I promise we'll get to them. We'll go by the order of how much, just to prioritize it. With a minute to go, $5. Thank you so much. We have great prospects for a virtuous bidding war throughout the West, where progress in one country ratchets expectations in another, but we in the EU will need USA's First Amendment umbrella. Another term, please. Yeah, we're doing our best. And I do think that it's actually made a really big difference what the United States State Department is doing, putting pressure on the European governments. This is one of these like hidden stories. You don't hear a lot about it. God knows we don't need to get into the problems with American foreign policy, but vis-a-vis pressuring the European governments on free speech, I think it's actually had a really important positive impact, and we shouldn't forget that. Helvetti Problem, $5. Great talk. Thank you, Jared, for all you have done. There was a $15 one from before on AI, which I want to get to. Here it is. Robert Capri, $15. Thank you so much. There's a current of hostility towards the AI industrial revolution among pro-whites. Is this mistaken? Could AI shift the economy away from addiction to cheap labor from non-white countries? Skull, you want to take this one? I know you hate this shit. I mean, my thing on it. Go ahead.
No, I don't hate it.
I was talking to him.
I see. Look, AI is coming. AI is neither good nor bad. AI will be what we make of it. And if we are smart and we can use it for our purposes, it will benefit us tremendously. It'll put people out of jobs. Well, one of the great things about our young people is this idea of becoming the best version of yourself. And the better you are, the better you'll be able to use AI, and the less likely you're going to be put out of a job by AI. Look at all those blue-haired people with, safety pins.
I mean, there's a lot of jobs that I think their fake email jobs will just be wiped out.
Yes,
I guess the bigger question, though, is there a certain, I don't know, a loss of authenticity, especially with things like art, with film, with graphic design. I mean, I don't care if it wipes out like Marvel movies, but I think there's something to be said. I mean, look at what computer art has done to just art in general. I mean, you look at something, I always talk about like tabletop games and stuff like that. Check out Grimdark Enlightenment, for example. But if you look at the kind of art that would go along with certain sci-fi or fantasy settings 20 years ago, I mean, we're talking people whose job it was to make oil paintings that like fit with a certain game or a setting or a history thing or something like that. And now it's just kind of cheap computer art that's forgettable the minute you make it. I think this is the concern with a lot of people. Now, maybe that's just the nature of the economy.
That's the nature of appealing to base instincts. Great art has never been appreciated by the masses. No. Great art. If we have the gumption to make it, there will be people who will appreciate it. That conversation we had back in Rome, I was saying to you, look, we come to Rome to look at things that the Romans did 400 years ago. And we marvel at the things they did 400 years ago. What are they doing now that we're going to marvel at 400 years from now? That is the way we have to be thinking. Right. And if AI helps us achieve something like that, so much the better. But it's up to us. AI is a tool. It's like the free markets. The free markets are an efficient way to organize resources. They can be directed badly, they can be directed well, but this business about the taste of the masses, that's never going to be improved. I don't think we need to care about that. But the name I couldn't think of is Tom Woods. He was with von Mises.
Oh, yeah, Tom Woods. Yeah, hoping to have him on at some point.
Oh, yeah, have him on. Well, he had a very good essay pointing out what 70 years the civil rights movement has done. And this is how he concluded his essay. We can hope that the Carmelo Anthony case accelerates the coming of the day when whites say, we have done everything humanly possible for you and received only hatred and ingratitude in return. You're on your own now.
That's basically what his father just said. I mean, we all remember a year ago, I don't know if you saw it, this like literally just happened, so I don't know if you saw it, but right before we got on, it was on the timeline everywhere.
Yes, his
you all remember a year ago, his father, when it happened, originally he wanted to pray with the murderer's family and everything else, and they basically chased him out, gave him death threats, and then he sort of lit them up at the victim statement, calling the murderer cowards, saying he couldn't look him in the eye and everything else, although even in that victim statement, he said, this isn't about race. It's about right and wrong, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, this was not the apologetic, like, like we're all, I mean, he was saying, like, I don't feel, people want to know what grief feels like. It feels like rage, cold rage. But then today, just real quick, because this is important. Today, he basically called them, I think this is a quote, correct me, Chad, if I'm wrong. I think he called them watermelon people. And like called them out as
watermelon felons.
Yeah, watermelon felons. There you go. Even better. And so like, he's not. He can see what's going on now.
I understand that he almost said the N-word, or he practically had to smother himself.
I mean, it could have been any word that begins with N. Yeah, but we don't know. He could have been ready to call him nincompoops. We don't know.
Mr. DeAnna, if it takes anything to wake up a white man, surely it's having your son murdered by black people who are prepared to dance on his grave. If that doesn't wake you up, nothing will. So this to me is nothing particularly, we can celebrate it. We're glad. Here's a white man who has come back from the brink. But if that doesn't wake you up, nothing will. And to me, the Tom Woods case is more significant because this guy, he's with the von Mises Institute, he's got a good podcast, and for him to say to blacks, you're on your own now, that is significant. That's what I've been saying for years now. We need separation. You do your thing, let us do ours. I think I'm going to coin a new phrase, Mr. DeAnna. I'm going to talk about the two-state solution. Ever heard of that? I think that's a great approach. Maybe a three-state solution. But for Tom Woods, who's saying, you're on your own. That means, that's a very nice way of saying, well, I won't even use the vernacular, but F off. I think that's very important. And Matt Walsh, he is now saying things that, golly, would have gone right down without a gurgle in the pages of American Renaissance. Right. And we've talked about Charlie Kirk. That guy was on his way to greatness. And the closer he came to our way of looking at things, the greater he got. I think that this energy, the head of steam, the movement that we're going, the momentum is unstoppable. Something is going to happen. What the solution turns out to be, I don't know. But I think something is definitely going to happen. It's going to be, in the next couple of years. Important things are building up. This can't be contained anymore.
No. I should note there was a black podcast host who said, in reference to your two-state solution, said because of the Carmelo Anthony case, I don't know if you saw this too, he was saying blacks need to do a large-scale migration back to Africa. Yes. And I said, we need to devote all federal resources to this immediately. I will triple taxes to make this happen.
He said, he was warning white America that our resources were going to leave. He's yet another one of these crazy black people who still think that we can't live without them. The level of self-delusion is astonishing to me. It's the more they demonstrate how utterly opposed to any kind of way we see things, the clearer it becomes we simply cannot live with these people. And I think a guy like that, yes. Throw us in the briar patch, We'll try to live without you, but bye-bye. In fact, we'll help pay your way. The more black people talk that way, the better. Anyway, the super chats are some of them. You have
some more are coming in. Yeah, there's one couple Random questions. Jared, do you have a good printer? Jared, are you Christian? Have you read Judges chapters 19 to 21? Cheers. I don't know.
Judges chapter 19. I don't know what that would be. That probably, Judges. Well, I suppose.
I mean, at some point, if you want to look that up,
I'll
while I go to the
next. There's some great passages in the Bible. Over the years, I've probably read just about everything in there, but I cannot quote that. I cannot honestly say, yes, I have.
Yeah, at some point or another, obviously, I've read the whole thing, but I cannot say that I can quote these on memory.
No.
Randall Flagg, $2. Randall Flagg, always for the live chats. Appreciate you being here, man. Howard Lutnick with a shit-eating grin at the NBA Finals courtside on national TV, while Jared Taylor is now the pariah du jour of the EU. I don't believe in karma, and neither should anyone. Yeah. Diego Huseman, $2. Thank you. It's ironic that the Algerian Jew, Eric Zemmour, was the better candidate in 2022 than Marine Le Pen, despite what her father Jean-Marie Le Pen thought about Jews. Zemmour, I think, was speaking at the Heritage Foundation on Monday, was he not?
Yes, he was. And
that tells you a lot where the conservative movement is going, too.
If I had had my wits about me, I would have tried to get down there. I met Eric Zemmour years ago. He was here because the English translation of his book, The Suicide of France, has finally come out. But that book is 10 years old, or maybe even more. And when I was in Paris at that time, I met him. And I said, I'd be happy to try to arrange for an American publisher to bring out The Suicide of France. It made a big stink at the time. And we had a very friendly conversation, but then his publisher discovered who I was and said, we'll look for a publisher.
Right.
That's too bad. Now, Zemmour had read some of the things I'd written. He was very cordial. And some of the identitarians I know worked on his campaign. In fact, quite a few of them supported him. And everyone agrees, yep, very surprising, an Algerian Jew is the best Frenchman in France, but since he's the best one and he's out there and he's carrying our flag, we're going to support him. We need all the friends we can get. I think Zemmour.
He's not running again, is he?
Well, he hasn't announced. I doubt that he will be running. It would probably just take votes away from Jordan Bardella, Marine Le Pen. But when I met him, I was very impressed. He's got this typically lively, Franco-Jewish intelligence, a very energetic, interesting guy. He looks you in the eye and he pays attention, and then he comes back with an answer that is quite insightful. I liked him. And what he says about France, I mean, how many other Frenchmen will just say straight up, Islam is incompatible with French civilization? Yes, Eric. Who else is prepared to say the obvious? I mean, but that's, I think in his own way, he's a first-rate Frenchman.
It'll be interesting. I do like the name of the part. I like the name of the party too, Reconquest.
Yes, but then I always say, who's the best white man in the Trump White House?
Right, Miller.
Stephen Miller. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Let's see. We've got a couple $1 ones. Van 11 1-2. Thank you for the $1 donation. Last week, I don't think you addressed my second point regarding your largely cynical view of the world. I'm guessing this is to me. Do you think such cynicism can be lifted both in attitude and in policy within a society that has both the capacity of and has actually demonstrated it can establish and run itself objectively? Well, what I would say is that this actually goes to your point, sir, about the difference between the younger and older generations. I think there's a kind of cynicism with the younger generations that you don't have the older generations regarding institutions and experts, where they just don't believe what they're saying. Millennials like me are somewhere in the middle. I think boomers, if you look at even the attitude to the 250th anniversary celebration of the United States or what they get from the government about whatever issue and everything else, they believe it because they still think there's a kind of value in these things. Whereas I think younger people just reject it entirely. And that's a very cynical attitude to have. But I think it does lead to like a greater sense of sincerity in the long run. If you had to, painting with a very broad brush, if you had to characterize the boomer generation as a whole, in many ways, they deconstructed or took a cynical or ironic attitude toward old-fashioned values like religion, patriotism, American identity. I mean, that's what the 60s was all about. But if you look at where Gen Z is going now, they're completely dismissive of a lot of the things that this older generation would regard as sacred. But the things that they do end up adopting, even if it's kind of ad hoc, even if they come to it in certain ways, like the approach to religiosity, which you see among a lot of them, especially on the right, I think there's like a real sincerity there and a real passion that you just don't see in the older generation. So my answer would be, I think the kind of cynical view of the world opens the door for a greater sincerity. But in order to get there, you have to like smash the idols of today first. So that's my answer.
That's an interesting point. I'm not sure if I would call it opening the doors to a greater sincerity. It opens the door to a certain radicalism. It's a willingness to say, okay, yes, we've had the same constitution, the same flag, the same form of government for 250 years, but it's not working. And we can do better. And if it requires chucking parts of it, all of it, we'll chuck it. That is, to me, the difference. My generation, a lot of them really are celebrating 250 years of the United States in a loving and admiring way. I'm going to be out of the country. And interestingly enough, my wife, she's a little bit disappointed. She wanted to celebrate the quarter millennium of the United States with her husband. To me, I'm not sure I wouldn't have been a Tory, frankly. My ancestors fought, they fought in the Revolutionary War. But back to this whole question of boomers as opposed to Gen Z. Gen Z does have a bleak view of the future, but I think that gives them a sense of much less to lose. We got the short end of the stick anyway. And so why shouldn't we make a mess of things? Why shouldn't we work to change things in a radical way? And certainly when it comes to race, they are much, much more committed, much more aware, and I think they're willing to roll up their sleeves, spit on their hands, and do something about white people. That's the aspect of it that most appeals to me. And if that means not caring about the Constitution, not caring about the flag, and all of these other symbols, the 4th of July, I don't care. I don't care, because to me, our race comes first. The United States has gone through a certain set of cycles. It used to represent our race. It used to be a home for white people. It's not anymore. And to the extent that it fails to be that, it's not my country. But that is a point of view that I think is very, very difficult for boomers to adopt, even though during the Vietnam War, they would march against the war, they would march against Lyndon Johnson, and they would say anti-American things. The older they got, the more comfortable they got with the little pile of money that they had made, the comfortable life that they had figured out for themselves. And I think they have settled into a kind of, I wouldn't call it mindless patriotism, but an habitual patriotism that certainly Gen Z is probably never going to settle into. That'd be my way of looking at it.
Right. I think that's the right way to look at it, yeah. Papa Peninator said $10. Thank you for the donation. When Moses told Pharaoh, "Let my people go," he had the sense to take his people and leave. Yeah.
Well, Moses resisted. I'm sorry, Pharaoh resisted at first.
Right, yeah. I think these blacks think we're going to be like Pharaoh, like, no, don't go. So. Please don't do that.
Please stay. God, we just can't make it without you. Who's going to fix our jet engines?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the pop culture reference where the guy's like, no, anything but that. Don't go.
Yes, right.
Vein $1. I've often heard by conservatives that cultural issues such as trans, race, gender, gay marriage don't really matter, and that they are all being used as a smokescreen, that we are busy hating each other while the elites enact political or economic policies that are making us poor and less free. There is some degree of facticity embedded in this premise, but I still believe that these cultural conflicts do matter as an end in themselves. How do you assess this? Yeah, I believe these cultural conflicts matter as an end in themselves. I get very impatient when they go, well, it's not left versus right, it's the elites versus you and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, no, first of all, policy is going to be made by elites one way or the other. The elites are divided among themselves. Yes. There's not a united, I'm not a Marxist, and so I don't believe in the idea of a united class consciousness. And the Marxists themselves don't even seem to really believe in that anymore, which is why they've shifted to racial and ethnic politics. And also, it only, whenever you see this, I always think, and maybe this is just my cynicism again, but I always think it's just a trick to be like, hey, listen, right-wingers, lower your opposition, and you can join in this kind of like left populist movement to take on the elites. And then later we can hash out our differences. But it only goes one way. I've never seen a leftist willing to compromise on immigration. I've never seen a leftist willing to compromise on these things. I mean, there's this popular Twitter post which goes something along the lines of, if you're in the campus socialist group, you don't have to endorse public ownership of property. You don't have to say that the government should own everybody's houses. But what you are not allowed to, you could still be in the socialist group, for example, and say that. I mean, if you look at the Democratic Socialists of America, how many of them call themselves socialists, but not really socialists when you look at like what they're advocating. But what you're not allowed to do is you're not allowed to say we shouldn't have immigration. What you're not allowed to do is say we shouldn't have tranny kids and everything else. Therefore, that is what socialism is. It actually has nothing to do with all this stuff or stuff. What socialism actually means, if we're talking about real politics, is it means trans kids and unlimited non-white immigration. That's what socialism is. And I don't have anything to discuss with those people.
Well, and that's why I've always been a little bit surprised that the old left seems to have disappeared practically without a trace. Without a trace. Now, briefly, were you aware of the Sarah Wagenknecht coalition in Germany? Sarah Wagenknecht was a woman, quite a sharp woman, an academic, PhD, wrote a lot of books. She was with the left party, Der Linkt, and it had started off as an old lefty workers' party. But she says, look, you've gone in the wrong direction. Now your proletariat is not the workers. It's the people you just described, non-whites, trannies, these goofballs. I am for German people. And so she
was this the BPD, that party? Was that, I think that's what they called it. Like she founded that party.
Yes. It was something Sarah Wagenknecht, SWB. It was the coalition, coalition Sarah, BSW maybe. Yeah. But it faded away. It didn't have any legs. She was a flash in the pan. I thought, well, because if you look back through American history, left and right were all unified on race. Somebody like Jack London, he was a socialist.
Yeah, 100%.
But he thought socialism was a way of organizing society for white people, that's the way white people are going to work, and to heck with the rest of them. He wrote some novels, aside from the ones that you read in high school about these animals. That's what happens. You get old. There's one, The Voyage of the Something or Other, and it's about it's the mutiny on the. In any case, it's written in the first person. It's a white guy, and he falls in love with the captain's daughter, and there's a mutiny. And the mutineers are all of these mystery meat people, but the captain and he are white people. And they know they're white people. And they're putting down the mutiny. And he talks about, this is the way our lordly race lived in the past. And I felt one with all of my great ancestors.
Yeah, I've read that excerpt, yeah. Yes. I haven't read the book you're talking about, but I saw that excerpt when I wrote something about Jack London and these kind of pro-white socialists that used to.
Yeah, a pro-white socialist. And
they were all like that. Look at the anti-Asian exclusion leaks in California. It was all socialists. It was all labor organizers.
Samuel Gompers, a solid white man, yes. There is absolutely no reason why a white man has to be a conservative. You can be, well, in fact, we had a great article once for American Renaissance, so Don't Leave Out the Lefties or something, by a woman by the name of Jellaby. And she said, look, there's no logical reason why people who are racially aware have to have a certain kind of politics. We can be racially aware and believe in gun control, racially aware and believe in large government. There is no logical reason. Things are just shaken out. Well, there are reasons for it. Of course, there are reasons for it. Religion, a general sense of conservatism goes with certain politics. But it used to be that in the United States, as far as race is concerned, politics, it was like politics end at the water's edge. Racial consciousness ends, it never got past the water's edge. We were all white men in this together.
Yeah. I think I would encourage people to take a hard look, and not just at labor history in the United States, but also in Australia. I mean, if you look who was driving for the White Australia policy, it tended to be the left. It tended to be the labor organizers, and the loss of that has really been critical to us. I just want to get through a lot of these other questions. Okay, Randall Flagg, $2. Thank you, Randall Flagg. Question for Mr. Taylor. Nationalism is clearly rising in Europe, but I feel Europe is handcuffed even more so by white liberals than North America. From my perspective, I see smug liberals online often.
Well, to me, Europe is handcuffed by a number of treaties. you can decide that you need to throw millions out, but there is some high court of justice that they all kowtow to.
Yeah,
Even
the
the
European
Brits.
Convention on Human
It's the
Rights. Yeah.
Yes, and there's the European Court of Justice. I believe Britain is still part of that, even though it left the European Union.
Yep.
These treaties have to be renounced. All of the immigration treaties, the asylum treaties, those were entered into after the war for people who were displaced persons within Europe. And then it became anybody who wants to go anywhere in the world. This stuff is crazy. You have got to get rid of those treaties. I don't think that Europe is any more handcuffed than we are. It's a matter of making the decision to do it, and I think that's one of the arguments that Zellner makes. I'm thinking of him because I recently read this book. He says there is nothing in German law that prevents doing what we want to do. Nothing.
Right.
It's a matter of will, and I think that's the case with the United States.
Oh, 100%.
Yes.
It's all the laws are all in the books.
Yes, it's a matter of will. Now, when it comes to stripping people of American citizenship, and when it comes
It's already underway. It's already underway. The Trump
well,
administration is stripping 17 people of citizenship right now.
Only because they lied on their applications. That is within the law. But if birthright citizenship is upheld by the Supreme Court, it's going to be hard to strip those people of birthright citizenship. Now, I'm hoping the Supreme Court will do the right thing. Perhaps retrospectively, some of those people can be stripped. There is an enormous amount that can be done simply by enforcing the law as it is, and I believe that's the same in Europe as well. One of the points he made, by the way, I've got Zellner on the brain. I thought that this was something that was an affliction only in the United States. He says we mustn't fetishize constitutions.
Right.
We have so many Americans. Oh, if we could only go back to the original interpretation of the Constitution.
We go back to the voting rules of the original Constitution. That might solve the problem.
Okay, but those have been changed.
Right.
If it were only property-owning white men? Yeah, that might be a good thing. But this fetishizing of constitutions, no, it's not what's in the Constitution. It's how it's interpreted. With the right will, you can do just about anything. And what matters is the will, and that to me is what's so encouraging. Is this head of steam behind a certain point of view.
100%. We were talking before about recharging the white man's batteries. This is how I do that. Vein one, $1. Well, there is much one can critique Christianity on. There is no denying that the Christianity that our ancestors cling to feverishly and even a few generations ago would be unrecognizable to the faith we call Christianity today. Yeah, that's true. That said, considering the universalist and meek nature of the faith, and some Christians would take issue with that, I think.
Yeah.
I'm just losing the thing. Sorry, I'm just reading the rest of the question here. Why do you think for the last 1,700 years our ancestors were able to internally coexist both as Christians as well as nationalists and patriots? Well, I think you kind of answered your own question in a sense that the Christianity of today would be unrecognizable to the Christians of the past. There are a couple books I've got because one of these days I'm going to do an episode or write an article based on the historic Christian approach to race, because you can find all these articles you can find popes talking about the Franks as a race chosen by God and the Turks as a race cursed by God, about the need to uphold the traditions of one race, about the lineage of nobility and stuff. God knows you can find all these Protestant clergymen who are talking about this, including certainly there's a whole tradition of Southern clergymen who were quite explicit about race and if you look at South Africa, if you look at the Reformed Church there, one of the verses that they use to justify apartheid, and which very religious Afrikaner women would use to shout down anti-apartheid protesters, was "Thou shalt not mix with the beasts of the field." They were really going after this kind of stuff, but it's a question of the conquest of institutions. I think it's we can get into what is true Christianity and what is the true meaning of the religion. God knows I have strong opinions on these sorts of things, but in terms of politics, I think it's really just a question of who is able to take over these institutions. Why does the church say one thing now and it said something different even 100 years ago? Because different people are in charge.
Exactly.
Same thing with the universities. Same thing with the Supreme Court. Same thing with what the Constitution means.
I've always argued that the church has been corrupted along with every single other institution. There are forces in motion that are even larger than the church or the media or the institutions, the universities. And after all, it was the same canon, the same Nicene Creed that was at Innocent III. He's the guy who started the first crusade. And yet, the last pope, he opened up a prayer room in the papal library so that Muslims can say their prayers in comfort and privacy when they visit the papal library. Innocent III would never have done that. But this is the same canon of books, the same Nicene Creed. It's the same Christian religion turned completely on its head. And yes, my Confederate ancestors, they had no illusions about race, but they were stout Christians, serious Bible-believing Christians, I think, certainly with a faith that impregnated their minds and their personalities far more than people who claim to be Christian today. And then there's another aspect, and I think it's important not to overlook this. We have become, as a society, more denatured when it comes to any kind of obviously true consideration of race or sex or any of those things as we become less Christian. The churches have become secularized just as the nations have become post-Christian. So if Christianity were the problem, then it would be the countries that have gone the furthest away from Christianity, which you find in Europe, in which in some countries practically nobody goes to church. They are no more and no less crazy when it comes to race than Christianity-oriented countries, of which the United States is one. And if you do a poll of people and you find how conservative they are on questions of immigration, for example, firm Bible-believing Christians are likely to
most
have
opposed
a
to immigration.
View. They have a healthier view. So I oppose the view that Christianity is either the problem or an important contributing problem. And of course, Christianity has impregnated our culture for 1,000 years, really. And I don't insist that you have to be a Christian in order to be a white man by any means. There's certain people that seem to think unless you're a Catholic.
I would hope not. Otherwise, I'm in a lot of trouble.
Exactly. To me, that is a side issue. You can be a fervent believer. You can be agnostic. You can be a pagan. You can be whatever, as long as you're a white man. I remember the Council of Conservative Citizens, very religiously oriented. But their main point was, are you a solid white man? And that's what mattered to them, even if to them Christianity was a very important part of their organizing. And that's the approach we have to have.
Vein One, another big question for Vein One, hitting me with these hard ones, these $1 donations. Philosophical question: what would you attribute to some people's susceptibility toward conceiving as well as subscribing to ideas and beliefs that are so manifestly untrue and or unnatural that defy every instinct in their body, such as racial self-sabotage in the interest of foreigners? I would actually argue that for some of them, some of it's status, some of it is, I think, what Sam Francis nailed, that egalitarianism is a way to pursue status.
Yeah.
And I would encourage people to read Sam Francis's article on that, which I think is available online because it was originally, I think, for the Von Mises Institute. I think it's also in Shots Fired. His specific thing is egalitarianism as a strategy for status. But I like what Ed Dutton has to say in that for some people, spiteful mutants, I think, is the unflattering term that he uses. Yeah. You're dealing, or bio-Leninism is this other term that gets tossed around. I don't think it's actually against their instincts. I think there are some people who tend to benefit from social dysfunction and that they get off in a way from this, like because they don't have the same interest as the larger racial community that they're a part of.
I don't buy that. The idea that
you think Dutton's wrong then about the whole
wrong
evolutionary law?
On these spiteful mutants. Why does it affect only white people? The same kind of genetic degeneration should be going on all around the world. But the East Asians, who are just as smart as we are, they don't go in the same direction. I think that, yes, there are what some people call luxury beliefs. And you always have to take into consideration the fact that white people in the 20th century fought 2 world wars. After the First World War, there was this tremendous, agonizing reappraisal of who we are. How did we stumble into this horrible, horrible mutual massacre? And then what? 21 years later, we do it all over again. So there was a genuine sense that nationalism leads to catastrophe, world war, extermination. Being aware of differences leads to world war, extermination. This was a very, very powerful lesson that my generation, one before, got. That, I think, is perhaps one of the important origins of what went wrong for us. At the same time, I think that white people by nature are simply more fair-minded.
And there's a lot of evidence to back that up.
Yes, we care about future generations, the environmental movement. We care about other species. We care about women. We care about one man, one vote. The idea, women in practically every other culture, they're sex slaves and beasts of burden. We put them on a pedestal because they have a point of view. The whole idea of freedom of speech, that means I may be much more powerful than you, but you can say whatever you like about me. Even I don't have the power to squelch you. Everyone has a point of view. Freedom of the press. All of these ideas, they've worked out over centuries, but I think they've developed a kind of high trust, mutual respect that works well for white people. But with this global population motion, it means that people who are conscious of the rights of others, as I say, the rights of unborn, if we care about the planet, the rights of other species, if we care about environmentalism, then we care about the rights of people in Africa and people who do not want to be with us, who cannot be us, don't want to be us, but want to benefit from our largesse. We become very, very easily manipulated. I think it's kind of a combination of those things, certainly rather more than the universality of Christianity. Pathological altruism, that's something that I think afflicts white people in a unique way. But
Randall Flagg has a comment. $2. Thank you, Randall. Mr. Taylor, in retrospect, Farage said Brexit would lead to less Polish immigration and more South Asian immigration, and that would suit Britain more since they are more anglicized than Slavs.
He has said all sorts of crazy things. There was a compilation of interview replies, and somebody asked him point blank, well, what do you think of the fact that because of immigration, the percentage of whites is dropping throughout England? So I don't care about that at all. And then another interview question, which somebody asked him, well, don't you think that millions will have to be... Oh, no. Oh, no. He has just given all sorts of waffly, weak-kneed answers to really important questions. But who knows? He may be enough of an opportunist to think that, okay, if Restore is going to steal his votes, he better steal their clothes.
Yeah, you actually want an opportunist rather than a principled guy who's principled about the wrong things.
Exactly. Go with the tide if the tide is something that we're behind.
And people forget that we can shape the tide. That's why you have that activist base outside, an existing political system.
Exactly.
And also there's a reason to sometimes have another party just to shape the tide, not because you necessarily think you're going to win. Although I don't count out the possibility of a flat out Restore victory at some point. Vane11, prepare yourself, Kevin, because I know you're going to hate me for asking this, but why AJAB? All journos are bastards, my little catchphrase. Hating journalists today because they are lockstep in the leftist agenda is one thing, but why do you generally hate journalists no matter what? Can there be no good ones? Is their work not generally not valuable to society? Well, here's the thing, and this may surprise you, because this is actually, I don't hate them because I think they're bad people or something like that. I hate them because of the institutional role. I think the incentives that they have. They are driven to constantly attack us and really to go after anyone who's doing anything interesting, because I see journalists as essentially narrative cops. And over the last 20 years, you've definitely seen that the people who campaign the most for censorship, for government control, for trusted sources being the only ones who are allowed to say this is the way things are, they tend to be journalists. And when people say, but they're our check on the government or anything like that, I do not think that is true. In fact, I think they tend to work more or less in lockstep with the government trying to police public debate. And I don't think it's because they're like, I'm evil. And I don't even think necessarily it's because of political bias. It's that if you make it so that only people who have a certain credential are allowed to talk, well, then journalists are the ones who get to shape the public debate, basically without any interference from citizens. So I think it is just kind of a straightforward institutional role. It's sort of the same thing. What is that based on, right? The all cops are bastards thing. If you think about a cop, I don't believe that for one thing. I like journalists significantly less than I like cops. But for example, if you are doing something that you shouldn't be doing, and a cop comes along and arrests you because you were stupid enough to like tell him that you were doing something you shouldn't be doing. And even if it's something petty, like, I don't know, burning leaves in your backyard without a permit, let's take something like that, and you get a fine or something. Oh, this cop is a mean guy. He did this to me. No, he's got an institutional role where, of course, he's going to do these kinds of things. And if you tell him, I am going to do this, and then he punishes you, yeah, that's on you. In the same way, if you are having a meeting and you say, oh, I'm going to have a journalist come to the meeting and talk to everybody at the group, and then all of a sudden somebody in the group says something that he shouldn't say, and then that gets blown up everywhere. Well, yeah, of course he's going to write that because it's in his interest to have the most sensational reading of whatever event is possible. So at some level, yeah, I suppose dealing with the media is inevitable. At some level, yeah, I suppose you do have to talk to journalists, although I prefer not to. But you always have to understand they're incentivized to act a certain way, and you can't trust in their good faith.
A couple of things.
I know you have a different take on that, but I will remind you of that New York Times guy that you tried to get me to talk to that one time and how that worked out.
Many of them are. I don't like to use the word bastard in public, but many of them are swine. No question about it.
That's much better.
Yes. Now, when it comes to the police, every time I've had an interaction with the police, I've rather respected them. They've got a very hard job. Especially
body cameras have definitely been showing us that, hasn't it?
Yes, what a job they have. They are a necessary phenomenon. I know several retired cops pretty well. And if it's your job to make sure that Black people behave and abide by the law, you have got the hardest job, I think, in the world. If you're in some big city, I have a lot of sympathy with police. And every time, occasionally I've been stopped speeding on a completely open road and been lectured about how I was going too fast.
Yeah, right.
Just give me the ticket. But most of the time, my interaction with police is they've got a tough job to do, and I'm glad there's somebody out there doing it. Now, journalists. You, Mr. DeAnna, one of the cleverest things of the many clever things that you have said is we don't have state-run media. We have a media-run state. I thought that was a very, very insightful thing, and I wish I had said that, but since you have said it, I will say it too. Now, the role journalists have now, they are certainly reflective of the mood and the zeitgeist and what is generally considered legitimate discourse, not just in journalism, but in every part of the country. Right. Government generally says what they say. Universities are even more to the left than they are. And the churches, they simply reflect the current state of view, the state of mind. And in that respect, you can't blame them. And all they are conformists. I think they're generally cowards in that respect. They're doing what they're doing in order to get ahead. And to get ahead, you say the sorts of things that the editor wants to hear. As I've often said, the way the media works, the journalists slant the news, and then they believe what they read in the newspapers. So it's this circular process of slanting the news and then saying, oh, this is reality. They do it because they believe it. And I think it's not because they're malicious. Now, it is certainly true that you can spend half an hour explaining to someone from the New York Times why, for a whole host of historical and logical reasons, it makes no sense to call me a white supremacist. But what do they call me when the article comes out? Of course, a white supremacist. They've got a job to do, and they're doing it. But I don't think every single one of them is a swine. Now, the trick is to distinguish the non-swine from the herd.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Right.
Do people often tax you with this what is it, AJAB?
Well, I came up with it. I know you
did. But in any case, I think that is almost a sidelong swipe at police officers who I think, as I say, have just about the toughest job in the country.
Just a couple more, and I know, sir, I think I said 8:30, and we're coming up on 9, so I'll let you go in a few minutes.
Please.
Release me.
Quick.
Yeah, all right. I'll let you Let's see if there's any for you specifically, and if not, I'll let you go. Frojax has rated the stream. Good to see you, buddy. Thank you. Madison Stodard, Murray Rothbard said if we gave African Americans their own homeland in America, that this new Africa would still require massive amounts of foreign aid. How would we solve that issue? Not give them foreign aid. I mean, that's really all I can think of.
Well,
I mean, if you had the...
We could give them a little bit of a boost to get going, and then you're on your own, buddy. You're on your own.
Right.
Yep. And see, my idea is if we gave them a substantial part of the country, they'd be selling parts of it back to us just to keep the lights on. We'd end up with all of it.
Right. Yeah. I think that's how decolonization has ended up working in a lot of places. Yeah. I mean, it's basically a small group of white people who keep it running.
Exactly.
Sneering Monk, $5. Thank you so much. The hardest hitting pieces on Amaranth for me have been those on schools. Between the browning of the student population and radicalization of teachers, how do we take education back? Is it even worth it?
Oh, it's worth it. It's worth it. Education is essential. I mean, that's one of the terrible things that has happened. Journalists, teachers, would you say ATAB? Maybe. Most of them are pretty swinish too.
They're pretty bad.
Yes.
I'm not sure it's right. I mean, certainly if you look at Peter Brimlow wrote a thing about this way back when, I think it was 20 years ago, a book about the teachers unions.
Yes.
And teachers. I mean, I hate to sound like a normie conservative, but it is a huge problem with what's going on with the teachers unions.
It is a terrible problem. As I've said many times, well, we could wave a magic wand. All of a sudden, we've got an ethno-state. And Kevin DeAnna is prime minister, and I'm, deputy prime minister. We would have a tremendous amount of work to do. The state of mind of white people in so many ways is sick, self-indulgent, lazy, chasing the wrong things. We don't have birth rates that are sustainable. There's so many things that are wrong with us, aside from the fact that we're being replaced. We have got a tremendous project ahead of us. But the first is to at least have a chance to solve these problems on our own and not with all these terrible hangers-on. And teachers unions are going to be a big part of that problem.
I agree. All right, Mr. Taylor, I think that's a really good... actually, Caesar117, do you or Jared want to collab with Frojax? I already said I would at some point, as soon as we can arrange it. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but...
No, I'm not. I'm willing to talk to
anybody
about that.
All right, well, there you go. There's your answer. So with that, Mr. Taylor, I know you've been very patient. Thank you for sticking through all this. I'll stay on for a bit and get a few more, but I'll let you go, if that's all right with you.
Well, it's always a pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Taylor. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All right, guys, I'll go through some more of the Super Chats. I know there's a couple more I still got to get to here. Madison Stoddard, part 2, $2. Thank you. I highly recommend Rothbard's essay, Right-Wing Populism. Yeah, I do too. It's an analysis of David Duke's governor's race and why the extreme right-wingers are a threat to the system, but extreme left-wingers are not. Yeah, that's a really good one. Just fine, $20. Sorry to interrupt your stream with an off-topic question, but I'm really looking for ways to provide tangible support to the Patriots of Belfast. That's not off-topic at all. We were talking about that earlier. I think that, man, that's a good question. I think that what we need to do on that front really is maintain their access to social media. I mean, that's the most important thing that we need to do right now. Because if we don't have that, they're not going to be able to get their message out whatsoever. So making sure that we have, a lot of pressure on that. All right, let's see what else we got here. Okay. Let me, okay. $5 one just came in. Dirt Gang, Arizona. Hail, Mr. Taylor. After he leaves. Thank you. Much appreciated. Okay, what else we got? I think there was a $1 one that I missed before. Let me make sure that this is still in here. Yeah, maintaining the support, Belfast access to social media, I think is the most important thing we can do right now, because they're going to round up a lot of these guys, and they're going to make sure that a lot of these people go to jail just for stuff that they post, not even so much for stuff that they do. All right, let's see. I think there was one from Van 1 that I missed. Yeah, a couple. Okay. JT has often said that there is something about the nature of white people that makes them uniquely empathetic and magnanimous toward the rights and well-being of others and the willingness to sacrifice for them. If you agree, why do you think that is? Well, actually, you don't need to listen to me. You can listen to what Sam Francis said in The Roots of the White Man, where he goes deep into our history and basically explains why these things came about. And I would encourage you to read that article. It's actually in Essential Writings on Race, which is available from American Renaissance. But just to put it very bluntly, is that there's this sort of aristocratic ethos that characterized white civilization in the distant past, and if you just play it out among a long enough timeline, it actually leads to some kind of liberal conclusions regarding things like freedom of speech, the idea of the law binding everyone, not just being commanded by some god king who just imposes a dogma and we all have to give into it. So that's where a lot of those ideas come from. But there's a very detailed treatment Sam Francis gives in The Roots of the White Man in Essential Writings on Race. So I encourage you to check that out, because I can't say it any better than he already has. How would you contest the argument? This is also from Van 11. How would you contest the argument? We are a private company and we reserve the right to decide who uses our services, such as with social media. I mean, I wouldn't, except that we're already past that point, right? I mean, the government has already said that they can essentially order social media to have certain people and not have other people. The Supreme Court sort of limited it somewhat, but not really. And when you look at the situation in Europe, I mean, that's not even a thing at all. Certainly, if you are going to use the private company thing, that kind of went out the window with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I mean, so the simplest one-sentence answer, how would you counter the argument that we're a private company and we can serve who we want? There are no private companies since the Civil Rights Act. That's how I answer it. Van 11, $2. Thank you. As pertinent to white people, the last 60 years can be characterized as simply the unleashing of white women to do whatever they want and be whoever they want. On account of human nature itself, when people generally get a taste of something they like, no matter whether it's good or bad for them or for society, they normally do not want to relinquish whatever it is. That said, now that white women have experienced the level of power and freedom they have for decades now, do you really think enough of them will come around to reverting their ways back to tradition for the good of society? It's not that they're going to come around to, it's that, I mean, at the risk of just broad brushes here, I mean, women tend to conform to whatever most women tend to conform to whatever the dominant trend in society is. I mean, if you look at when women's suffrage was introduced, supported by people like Mussolini, by the way, one of the arguments against it actually came from the socialists, because they said, well, they're just going to vote for who their priests tell them to, which is basically what happened if you look at who they voted for in those early elections. It's a question of you reverse the situation at the top first, and then everybody will kind of realign. And they follow incentives. And if you look at the female vote, at least among white women, first of all, it's not true that white women overwhelmingly vote for the left. That's not true at all, at least in this country. But there is a very big divide between married women, especially married women with children, and young women without children whose daddy or boyfriend is essentially the state. But now we're just talking about changing the incentives. And if you change the incentives, I think they're going to change the morality and the ideology that justifies them supporting that thing. So it's not that we need to convince them. I think that's largely a waste of time. It's that you need to change the incentives, and then they'll change along with it. But that's true for most people. It's just especially true with women in general, I think. Frojax, $20. Thanks, man. Support from the Frojax brothers. Everyone subscribe. Really appreciate that, man. Looking forward to working with you guys. Have I missed anybody? All right, let me just go through real quick. Is there anybody I have missed? I do not like missing anybody. I think we've gone through just about everybody. Yeah. Good conversation. Jared, do we go through? Oh, there's another one from Van 11. $2. Part of the reason why our societies have adopted these liberal individualist ideals for the last 60 years is because they could afford to do so. They have enjoyed, and I think part of it's missing, but I think what, yeah, but I'm not seeing, oh, no, but I don't see the second part of this. Van 11, I think I know where you're going with this one. Basically, are they going to give up these ideas because they can no longer afford to do so? Yeah, I mean, when you see what drives ethnocentrism in the broadest sense, across societies. And scholars have done a lot of work on this, especially in regard to like genocide studies of all things, because I mean, obviously it's kind of a fake profession and you see it's attached to NGOs and everything else. But I mean, they do study real things, which is how do you have a society where people more or less live together? They may not like each other, but they're not killing each other. And then one day all hell breaks loose. And really it is shortage of resources that drives a lot of it in a lot of these cases. So yeah, people will become more ethnocentric, more tribalist as resources decline, as competition for aforementioned resources increases. But they're not going to change their mind. It's going to be justified on the grounds of grievances. It's going to be justified on the grounds of they started it. It's going to be justified on like liberal grounds to start with. In the long run, whether our societies are going to recover is going to be reliant on our ability to operate outside liberalism. This is something Ricardo Duchesne talks about over and over and over again. Like you have to step outside liberal individualism at some point. But that's a big thing. I mean, I'm trying to do that, and I think I'm going to be doing some more stuff on books and works and building this kind of thing. And when I finally redo my own book, it's going to be about that because we have to do that. There's not really a way we can – politically, we have to sound as moderate as possible in the sense that everything we want to do is within the existing law, and the laws are on the books to let us basically do whatever it is that we want us to do. But in the long run, we have to step outside this whole system that we're in right now. Otherwise, we're just going to end up in the same place. Vein 11, have you ever heard the assertion that capitalism is Jewish? Can you expand on it? How do you feel about it? There's actually a book, which I have, historical book. I think it's called like Capitalism and the Jews, but I have to read it. But essentially, it's the argument that this group pioneered certain practices, and then this practice essentially swept the world because it became the standard way of doing this kind of stuff. I think that's a little questionable in the sense that you could go back to the oldest banking houses in Europe, and they tend to come out of Italy, and then, of course, the Netherlands. If you absent this one factor, would you still have ended up with capitalism and fractional reserve banking and all these kinds of things? Probably. It would have developed maybe in a slightly different way. If you looked at something like, the way the Federal Reserve operates, maybe different people would be in charge, but would it operate functionally in a different way? I don't think so. I mean, the ends that it's directed toward might be a little different, but these sorts of banking houses were in Europe for a very long time, even before all that. That said, I mean, there are other ways of doing things. If you think of like the Knights Templar, I mean, they were essentially the banking house of Europe for a long time, and I don't think they charged interest the same way that people do now. Renunciate gives 5 subscriptions to Identity Politics. Thank you so much, Renunciate. All right. I think we have gone through everybody, have we not? All right. Well, thank you so much for, guilds work well. I'm just seeing the comments at the end. There's a whole tradition on the far right talking about bringing back the guild system and all this kind of stuff. Although it should be noted that was one of the big things that the Enlightenment was trying to destroy was the guild system. But I actually like the guild system. Guys, great conversation today. Thank you so much for all your great questions and for all the support. I really appreciate you guys joining me on this live stream. It means a lot to me, and it's always a real pleasure to join you guys every Thursday. So I think we're going to call it a night for tonight. Thank you so much. We'll catch you next time on Identity Politics. I'm Kevin DeAnna. We'll talk again real soon.